Let's do a show. Hello. Welcome to the first day of March edition of You Can't Do That on Salesforce. Insert obligatory cliched statement about I can't believe it's March already, but I really can't believe it's March already. And there goes February. What are we going to do today? Batchflow. Right there. Batchflow is actually not a new project. Batchflow started out as another app that I was working on. It was called Mass Batch. So it's basically the same thing. It's going to be a set of utilities that's going to let us call flows dynamically in the context of a batch Apex execution. So what does that mean? That means that rather than having to write batch Apex for every business process or data related, large execution process across a whole bunch of data, a whole bunch of records, we don't have to write that code anymore. We don't have to write Apex, run a unit test, do all that stuff, and deploy it. We can actually have the code run in batch process and run through Apex, or I'm sorry, not Apex flows, just Salesforce flows to do the same thing. So what do we get? Possibly the last time you'll ever need to write a batchable Apex again, maybe, and definitely a new place for that data related business logic to go, namely into flows, which one could argue are a little bit more configurable, a little bit more legible, a little bit more readable, a little bit better understanding of what the heck is going on. So that's the vision. So I do have some stuff already built for this one. This won't be a complete cold start. We'll be able to do a little bit of Julia Child, put the turkey in, take the turkey out of the oven a little bit faster. My whole goal really for today is to bring some structure around this concept and get it into a repository, and then y'all can check it out and do whatever you want to do with it. So let's do that. Let's get started. Here we go. First, we're going to need the usual suspects. Let's get ourselves I'll do this as a new project. Y'all can't see anything. There we go. That screen looks weird, doesn't it? Hang on a second. Still have some, still recovering from, not recovering. Had an awesome time with Tony Karumba last week on the show, and his temperature blanket app thing, super cool. I think he's going to come back and hang out a little bit more, and get to see the progress he's made between then and now. Move that icon out of the way. All right, blank Visual Studio Code. Let's start a new project. I hope I have this aligned to the right dev hub so we don't get stuck. Batchflow. Put that in my dev folder alongside all the other stuff that sometimes gets worked on. All right, speaking of orgs, I got something that's going to expire here, but I'm actually okay with that. That was from a different presentation. So I did talk about this project a little bit at Cactus Force earlier. Well, I guess now 2 months ago, right? Because I think that was January, and shared it as part of my Flow and Code Living Together Mass Hysteria presentation, which I'm going to do again at Mid-Atlantic Dreamin'. Have maybe some more content to add to it. So I presented this as, there we go. We're looking at the wrong dev hub. I'll digress off to the side here and try to remember how to set that up. But yeah, presented this at Cactus Force, and as part of that overall session, because I really think this does hit both sides of the both sides of the aisle, if you will, because we're gonna write some code. We've got this engine in Apex that's gonna do that can do the work for us. We're gonna have some flows that can be called. Really, any flow can be called dynamically. Well, I guess I should say any flow can be called any not auto triggered flow, right? So any of those, I can't remember what they're called right now. We'll look at them in a second. But the flow that you can call from Apex, from REST, from from the APIs, etc., those will all be accessible to this tool, to Batchflow. And I just need to get my, let's see what my settings are here for my SF config list, I think. Target dev hub global fatal. Neat. Okay, that's not what we want. Anybody else run into this? It takes like forever for the command line to finish like doing its thing. Like it shows you the results of an SF command, and then it just hangs for like 5 seconds, and then it stops. It might just be me. What do we have? Let's see, SF org list. Maybe cooking. There we go. Let's see. We got Pong. We got stuff. We got which one should we use here? Let's try to set. We'll try to set with the first one. See if we can create an org, and if we can't, then we'll set the other one. This is. Make sure I got this right. We want to set a config. Config set. Target dev hub. Yep. All right, so SF config set target dev hub equals that. Oh, wait. Target. No? Target dev hub. Oh, wait. No, it's that's not a flag. See, again, waiting forever. All right, let's go back here. Dude. There we go. All right, let's try to create this again. Maybe once it's finished here. The trials and tribulations of having more than one dev hub, because you can only have, what is it, 3, I think, active projects, active Scratch orgs coming out of a dev hub. So I got a lot of stuff flying around, and I need a couple of dev hubs, which means a couple of dev orgs, which means I'm not always sure which one's pointing where. We'll find out if this works, and it didn't, so we'll change this up again to my other. Let's see, what's the name of the other one? Very cleverly, Dev Hub 2. Okay. Here, let's do that, and then we'll try again. I don't know why I type that every time. I think it's just going to take it as the default. Let's get the chat up here too. The longer it takes, the better the news. So hopefully we're getting what we need here. All right, in the meantime, I've got another window for maybe not. Let's see if I can find it here. There it is. Cool. We got ourselves an org. All right. So what is Batchflow, formerly known Mass Batch? You have to take 2 words that that relate to features on the Salesforce platform, and if you smash them together, boom, you've got a product. So, advice for anybody: if you want to make a new Salesforce product, just pick 2 features, stick their names together, and then try to invent something that relates the 2. Hence Batchflow for us. Okay, let's haul some stuff in here. First, this isn't a huge code base that was running this thing, but I do want to review it and kind of talk through it, or at least talk at it. Obviously, if anybody's on the chat or elsewhere and wants to hop in, please feel free. Would love your advice and opinions. But here's where it all started. We'll create a new. Let's create a new Apex class. We'll call this Batchflow. All right. And then, so Batchflow is going to, in essence, we're going to be able to, at first we're going to be able to call it from, like from a Apex class, right? So like execute anonymous Apex or what have you. The key aspects of Batchflow are act upon a set of records, decide if we're going to make any change to those records or do what I call wump the records. That's really what mass batch all started out as, right? Wumping. What is the wump? Wump is a word that we use affectionately at Red Argyle at my day job when you just need to touch a bunch of records with the expectation that the flows that are associated with them will fire, the triggers will fire. Sometimes you do it to reset data or correct something that went wrong somehow in your org. Sometimes you need to do it maybe once a night to process some data that gets imported or something like that, but it doesn't automatically touch those other records. So all those kind of weird use cases was what we call wumping the data. It's where you just basically you do an update, right? You make an update call against a bunch of records, and then they run through all the processes as if they were updated. Now it doesn't bypass any kind of logic that you might have in your trigger framework or something like that says only do this if this value is changed or anything like that. You're still beholden to that. So then that's where mass batch can come in and say, I want to do the wumping thing, and here's what I want to execute in the context of my wump. And here are the flow or flows, supports multiple, that I want to have execute, and here's the sequence in which I want them to run. So maybe I've got 10,000 accounts and I want to update the favorite color on all of them. Stupid example. I've got a flow that does that, that will receive each record as an input parameter, make a change, and then be able to pass it back. With the batch mode, the batch state that we're going to run Batchflow in, we can also tune the number of records that will be processed at a time. So Batchflow is also a great way to throttle the amount of data processing that you're doing. I do this a lot with batches and scheduled. It's like I need this to run eventually. I don't need it to happen immediately. I do want to have control over the whole data set and be able to observe what's going on with it. So but having a batch size of 1 keeps me from, hitting governor limits and things like that. And, not saying a batch size of 1 is perfect because we've got a limited number of batch iterations that we can get every day. But at least you have something to tune with. So maybe it's not 200, maybe it's not 1, but maybe it's 10 or 25 or something like that. So, all that saying, let's take some code that was written before and move it into Batchflow. We'll talk it through. There's some stuff in this that I wish I could have changed, and I feel like now is a good opportunity to, let's go make those changes. So let's start with, so first things first, Batchflow is going to implement a couple of interfaces. And I did not paste that very well at all. Let's do this. Here we go. All right, so it's going to implement batchable, right? Obviously, we want it to run over. That's the whole point of Batchflow, is to work in a batch mode. We're going to implement database.stateful because we want to maintain some state across each of the calls. And it implements schedulable, so you can take these batches, these Batchflow functions, and run them on a schedule, run them once, later, do all those things. So we're going to implement that as well. And the core of this, if we bring in a couple of, so what do we need to implement to satisfy the batchable interface? We need start, I think. Where are you? I'm looking off to I'm Julia Childing here off to the side. So, all right, we need start. So we need some way to, we gotta kick this thing off. So this is for implementing batchable interface. What are we gonna do? Well, we're gonna query for some stuff. So some dynamic SOQL here that will backtrack into being able to pass this the S object name of whatever we're going to process. We want to be able to apply some kind of filter to that. So we're going to pass in some, again, dynamic where clause that will be able to control when we, request a batch flow execution. And then the start, this is just standard batchable. We need to return that query locator of the SOQL that we're going to run. We need to implement execute to satisfy the batchable interface. And I have a whole bunch of code that's going to come over for that, but we'll leave that behind the curtain for a second until we get through everything else. And then we also need to implement finish. So what should happen when this batch is done? And again, we'll talk about that too. Now, if I move on, I don't think I have to implement anything for database.stateful that I can remember, but I might be proved wrong and we'll discover it later. Schedulable also needs to have implemented. It also has an execute that it's going to, that it wants us to implement. So the fact that we're doing a schedulable to both, we're doing two interfaces. We're doing the batchable and the schedulable. We have to satisfy both. They take different parameters. So, we're kind of overloading it, if you will, but they play nice together in this regard so that we can use both at the same time. Okay, so the execute for the schedulable context, I'll put this down a little further so we can kind of keep our batches and our schedulers together. So we need to when we're running this in batchable mode, we just need to kick it off right at some point, and that the schedulable is basically going to turn into the batch execution at that point. All right, we talked about a few parameters here. So what did we talk about? We talked about S object type. So we want to be able to pass that in. So I'll grab that. We talked about a SOQL where clause. So let's grab that. And here's a property for that. We're initializing it if it doesn't exist, so we don't have to worry about checking for nulls over here. A couple other things we're going to need. We probably want to be able to manage the batch size. So by default, we got 200, but let's make sure that when we call Batchflow that we can dictate the number of records that should be run at a time. And that'll default to 200. I'm talking, there's this notion of an action, right? So wumping, right, is essentially doing an update on the records. You could also delete, right? You could delete with Batchflow if you wanted to. Here's 10,000. Here's a query that returns X number of records. I want you to delete all of those. Doesn't even need to use the flow component. It could just touch the record, or it could just delete the records. So I want to introduce like an action parameter. I feel like this should be some kind of enumeration. Right? I didn't really like just throwing magic strings around for this stuff. So maybe we'll turn that into an enumeration. In fact, maybe we just call it public enum. Let's call it Batchflow flow action, right? And then I think this is the syntax: update, delete. I wonder if it's going to let me get away with those because am I even doing the syntax of that right? Let's go find out. Apex enum. Yep. Okay. I guessed right. But I wonder if it's going to let me do these because they're reserved words. Yeah, we'll see. We might have to come up with our own terms. But for now, we'll let's leave that in. In fact, let's just save this. What's it going to yell about? It's probably going to yell about a init because we don't have that in here yet. The other thing that, well, not the one other thing, one of the many other things that my old implementation of this didn't have was some ability to like configure these. Like I had a vision, I had a thought that maybe there would be a way to configure your batch flows in custom metadata, or maybe a custom object or something like that. Custom metadata would probably be favorable because then you can deploy it, etc. And also maybe some way to monitor a little bit better. So we'll come back to that. That's like way down the road here. All right, what are we missing? Batchflow must implement. I thought we were. We're not implementing. Oh, it must have some other. There's got to be something else going on in here. Public enum. Is that why you're giving me drama? See, again, I think maybe it's the update that's reserved word that's wreaking havoc here. Or I just have some stupid syntax error that I'm just not seeing. Pushes are taking a long time for me the last couple of days. Yep, there we go. All right, so I don't think it likes update or delete as the commands here. So maybe we need to do something, call it something different. Update action, delete action, or what could we call it? I wish I could use these and say update action, delete action, I guess. Maybe I'll come up with some more poetic names for that at some point, but okay, so we've got our enum, and then we can do this, and then we can do, so that's called our action, and then we'll call this, we'll default this to update action. Because by default, wumping is like touching the record, right? So I guess we call it wump. Wump and destroy. No, let's not do that. Okay, so we have this is the action. We're going to be able to tell the the batch flow what to do, and let's kind of outline, what's this going to look like when it gets called, because maybe that'll help bring some of this together too. So imagine, if you will, a future where we can say something like batch flow BF equals new batch flow. And then we'd be able to say BF dot, let's see, action equals, I know it defaults to that, but we'll be very thorough here. This is BF action dot update action. I don't love those in screaming text. Maybe I'll change that. What else? So we're going to tell it what, we have that S object type variable. So S object type equals, let's say, account. And I'm going to do something to a bunch of accounts. Maybe I'm going to filter that. So I'll say Sokol where equals, let's say created date greater than equals this year, maybe. Let's go with that. All right, so I'm going to do something to a bunch of accounts this year. And then I'm going to, call it or run it. So we'll come back to that. So so we can see, like, all right, hey, we're gonna create an instance of this. We're gonna set some variables, or set some properties, and then we're gonna go run the thing. Now we haven't actually gotten to the run the thing yet, but we will. We will. What else do we need to do here? So up to this point, we've just been talking about, okay, cool, you're going to go select a bunch of records, and then you're going to send it into, what? Well, because it's a batch, it's going to get sent into execute, and here's where the execution will actually happen. And, here's where what we do when we're done. So what is the what's going to happen? Well, this is where we're going to kick in and say, let's call flows on these records and process them and have a way to do that in a structured, sequential kind of way. We're going to get to that. For the moment, let's gather a few more data points here, right? So oh, I'm sorry. We need to implement one other thing for schedulable. We need to implement schedule, right? And that's going to take. Do we? Let me double check. Schedulable. Oh no, I'm sorry. It's just execute. That's all we have to call. All right, so but we can perform the scheduling, right? That's one of the when we create a new batch flow, and we can make a schedule call to actually have it schedule itself. Okay. What have we got? Well, let's do this execute piece, because we'll get into scheduling a little bit later. What are we going to do for executing? So in our example up here, all right, I've requested that Batchflow runs. I've created a new instance. I've told it everything I want it to do. So when it runs, we're going to execute against however many records are part of that query that we've assembled here. Worth noting that we're only getting the ID here. So I have some thoughts about this, and when it'll become more clear when we talk about passing the records into the flows, there's a question of like, well, what fields do you have populated, and do you essentially need to turn around and requery for the records that you're passing in, versus maybe another way to do that, something to, food for thought. But for now, when we start, we take this, we create a SQL call, we pass that back. To initialize this thing, I think it's also worth storing I want to store the batch job ID of what we're running, because then we can use that potentially later for other purposes. I haven't found a purpose for it yet, but it's what we're doing in the old implementation. So let's carry that over. So we can get the batch job ID if we when we actually execute our batch. So let's go ahead and we'll have an init call in here. So that was the init from before that we saw in the schedule context. We need a way to kick this thing off and get the batch ID back from it. So when we execute a batch, what are we passing in? We're passing in the batch itself, which is Batchflow, and then we're going to pass in the batch size, which Batchflow also knows about, and then we'll get our ID back, for free. So when we execute in the scheduled context, all we're really doing is saying, all right, cool, I use a schedulable interface to actually schedule the thing, but I'm really just going to turn around and run this batch. So I can call this.init from here as well. So we've kind of, does that batchable? Down here, sorry. Schedulable. Just fire up, turn, and start the batch process. There's nothing more that we're really doing, using schedulable for than that. So with that kind of takes care of the schedulable side of it. We'll come back to how do we actually, schedule one and, and do all that fun stuff. But the meat of where we're going to work is in the execute context. So what have we got? Well, we've got some incoming records, the scope, which is going to be whatever this query returns at whatever batch size we've asked for. So if we've got 10,000 accounts coming in, I'm going to get 200 at a time in this, in this current context. If I set the batch job or batch size to 1, I'll get one at a time. So we have these incoming records. We want to get these incoming records ultimately into flows. And then we want to be able to configure what flows do we want to send them to. So before we can do that, it probably makes sense for us to be able to tell, have Batchflow know, we want to tell it what flows to execute in the context of the batch. So we're gonna do some name matching on those flows. So let's grab a, I don't know why I'm like why am I one extra space away there? That's really neat. Let's have a flows property that we can put a bunch of flow names into for right now. Maybe this becomes a more robust object. That was another thing I was kind of thinking about. I was like, I'm doing a lot of, again, string matching kind of stuff here. Maybe we want that to be a little bit more robust. We want like an object to represent our flow configurations. Let's provide a way to store the parameters of flows. So if we go look at how you call Apex or call flow from Apex, it looks like this. Talk this through a little bit. Launch a flow from Apex. So here's where the work is happening. This map is the parameters that you pass into that you can pass into a flow, and we can see how it, we populate it with something. This is what's going to go through to the flow. Now you can. This is a very literal implementation of a flow or execution of a flow in Apex. We can also do this dynamically. So if I find the better example of this. So we can see again here, we're preparing the variables. These are the parameters, the input parameters that we can pass in. We know a name. We know a name based on what our flow is going to accept, and we'll build an example so it all ties out. Here's another literal call to a specifically named flow, and if we want to do that, I don't have the dynamic example either. Let me find a good example where it's more dynamic. I could just show you the code that I wrote, but it's so abstract that I don't know if it's. We'll start somewhere more straightforward, if we can find it. See if our friends at CRM Science are doing. Nope, this is calling Apex from Flow. We want to call Flow from Apex. Here we go. This actually might be pretty vintage because a lot of this changed. Yeah, a lot of this changed a while back. This might not even be accurate anymore. Nope. All right, I'm just going to show you the code that I wrote for this. So when we call a flow from Apex, we have a couple of options. We saw the very literal option there. We can also do this a little bit more dynamically, right? So we'll start with some, I'm going to be very literal with my terms here. I'll call these the input parameters. These are what we're going to pass into the flow. We can set some of these, and we're going to in a minute. Right? That's how we would set a parameter. I do want to look at these parameters because when I first built this, it was with the thinking that, oh, I'm going to provide input parameters and then I need the flow to give me back output parameters. But I think what I want to be able to do is just say, here's a record, do what you need to it, and shuttle it back to me. So it can be both the input and the output parameter. Again, we'll come back to that. And then here's creating a flow or kicking off a flow dynamically. All right, I got the flow, create interview. Here's where the dynamic mojo comes in, right? So instead of having to say flow.interview.my specific flow name, I can do flow.interview.create interview, dynamically pass the flow name, and pass in the input parameters to that. So we have control to access any flow that we want, provided a couple of rules, right? We want to set up kind of a contract between Batchflow and a flow that it's going to call, and we're going to say, hey, we've got some specific records, or I'm sorry, some specific parameters that we'd like to pass to you. These are what they're going to be called. And if you, Flow, can go ahead and implement those on your side, then we both are talking the same language, and we can pass the parameters in that we need and then get back what we want. So that's by the nature of this being dynamic, we can do interesting stuff like pass one or more flows into the execute method and have our records get processed by each of them. So that's where we're gonna end up here eventually. To make everything work, we got to say flow.start. We can get output variables back from this. So there's another call if we want to get stuff. So I pass parameters in, process, and then I check that box for any parameter that I want to have come back to me and that I can access. We can get those with flow.get variable name, give variable value, and that's going to send it back to us. So we can use that, to our advantage here as well. This will also kind of beg the question of like, okay, how do we do record shuttling, right, or shuffling in and out? So we'll take a look at that here in a second. We'll get a flow going that sort of shows how this all comes together. Okay, so for now we've got this. Here's the basics. Here's where we're going to start from. Now, what I obviously want to do is say, boy, it would be cool to store and configure these flows that we want to run. So I want to get to somewhere like, if we keep using our example at the top here, make that a little bigger. Just realize it's kind of small. I've picked the action, I've picked the object I want to run against, I've written the filter for what more specifically the objects I want to work with. Now I want to add some flows, right? I want to say here's what we're actually going to execute in that execute context. Let's do a little bit more work here because we don't just want I could do this, right? I could say, hey, bf.flows.add, my rad flow. And then I could do that again, right? I could say bf.flows. This would be flows because that's our variable name here. My rad flow 2. Okay. My rad flow without a W. My rad flow 2. Right? We could keep doing that. Awesome. Dynamic. We can loop over it. We can run a bunch of flows. However, I don't know the parameters that I might want to pass into each of these. So let's take a step back from just our, which hence is why this is private, because we don't actually want you to call it this way. I want you to add a flow more intentionally. I know I'm mixing my properties and my methods here, but so it goes. So I can instead, let's expose an add flow method that can take the flow name. And if it takes the flow name, we'll add a flow and we'll pass it an empty parameters. But probably more interesting is we want to add a flow. Let's add a flow with some parameters. So we can still pass the name. Now we can pass our own map of params in the structure that flow is expecting. So we'll add it to our flows list. For some reason, we might not actually need to do this. And we'll add it to our, I think we have another structure here. Where are you? Oh, actually, no, I take it back. We're going to add, we're going to keep two, maybe again, data structure topic, consideration here, because right now I've got two properties. The flows store the name of the flows, and then the flow input params store the input parameters, and they're kind of, whatever the index in the flows property. So if I've got the first item in the flows list maps to the first item in the flow input params list, which is a list of maps. Maybe we want to structure that a little bit differently, so it's just kind of easier to work with. So we'll come back to that. But at the end of the day, we can, instead of calling flows.add, let's call add flow. So we could call it this way for one flow that doesn't take any parameters. I don't know exactly why you would do that, but we could also say add flow, and then you could pass in your, your map. Not exactly the right syntax, but your map to your string and your object, right? Which is the structure that the flow is expecting. So we've got that now. So we also have some sequencing here, right? So if the list of flows, we're going to say first in, first out. These are how we're going to call the flows against the data that you've got coming in to the execute context. So back down here, what we're doing here is kind of right. I'm actually going to comment this out because we're not doing anything with that yet. But now let's layer in our configuration for our flows. We want to run more than one of these. So let's say this. Again, I think maybe this logic will change. Maybe we want a different data structure to store the flow information, which literally could just be a string and a map for the params. In fact, if I was going to do this, how would I? Let's see. Where's my enum? Let's move this up. And then why is it doing that? Oh, it must be this. This must be throwing it off. I forget what I installed that made this work in VS Code, but now it's being kind of a dum-dum. If I were to do this public, might not even need to be public. It could be a private class. But private class, batchflow.flow config, maybe. And then we'd have a string for the name. And then we'd have a map for the parameters, input parameters. Okay, pretty small little data structure there, but we could use that here instead. And when we do add flow, we could have it take care of that for us as well. We could default the input parameters. I started doing this in another project. I don't know. Kind of torn. But on the other hand, it's like once you set up a property like this once, you can kind of, this sort of like it initializes itself when it's first requested, so you don't end up with a null reference situation, and you also don't necessarily need a constructor at that point. It's hard. It's a little hard to read when you first look at it, but once you get 5 or 6 of these that need to happen, it's just sort of like, oh, okay, it's if null, it's this. Change the data type, return the thing, and set. I don't usually do anything in a set in a set execution on a property. So. Let's go with that. Throw tomatoes at me if you don't really dig that. I totally understand. All right, well, let's convert this while we're thinking it through. So instead of a list of strings, let's have a list of flow configs. All those flows. And then again, I'm just going to grab this. If flows is null, flows equals a new list of flow config. Okay, and then return flows. There we go. Okay, so now we've got that property, so we'll go ahead and we'll use that. It kind of gets rid of the need for this as well. Not kind of, it does get rid of the need for this. It's going to change how we call these. So we'll need to create a new create a new flow config. New And the name, excuse me, equals the flow name. Not like that though, like this. Okay. And we are going to overload that so we can pass the name, or we can pass the input parameters. I'm trying to be very literal with my naming conventions here. So instead of having to do this, duality situation, we're going to, so what we can actually do here is say add flow. Let's see, we don't actually need to implement this here yet. We can go down here and say, all right, we'll do the actual work here. The flow is the flow name, and then the flow.input parameters equals input parameters. Then we can add that to our flows list, and we don't need this anymore. And then I'm just going to forward this on to the next, so if I don't have any params to pass, then I'll just forward it on with an empty map to that. Okay, so now we've got that internally, so we can come back down here. We want to loop over these, so which we've got, right? So if our flows size is greater than 0, do stuff, right? So now the question is, if I'm going to do this, how many records should I actually be passing into my my flow? And I guess there's a case for, for wanting to pass in a list of records or not. And that's one thing that mass batch didn't do anything. It basically assumed that I'm going to pass one of these records into you flow every time. And so in essence, the flows were running once per record. That might not be a bad thing, right? But that might not be the effect that we're looking for. I'm gonna let my dog out. Hang on. Go ahead, Pope. There we go. All right. So in my first implementation of this, I would check and say, first of all, we can check and say, hey, are you running any flows? It's perfectly reasonable not to, and then this just becomes like a wumping activity, right? We touch the records, they get updated, and then we're done. But we may, if we do pass in records, if we do pass in flows, we want to do something with those, with the flows against the records. So here's our scope. This is one or more objects, records of the object that we are querying out. And we're going to loop over that. Again, this is with assuming that the records should run one at a time. Maybe in our flow config, we can indicate how it should run, whether it's one or more, or one record, or the size of the scope. I guess that's kind of the setting that we'll have there. But here is, let's do the original implementation of this. So if I'm looping through my records that are coming in, now I'm going to loop through my flow configs. In this dot flows. Really, this should probably be flow configs if I'm being good about my naming scheme here. And I guess arguably this should be add flow config, right? We'll get away with add flow for the end user consumer. Okay, so for each of my flow configs, what am I going to do? I'm going to somehow do this, right? I don't need this because I have, or do I? We'll come back to that. So out of the gate, I could just say run flow config dot flow name or dot name. Is that what we called it? We call it name? Yes. Okay. Flowconfig.name. Flowconfig.name, flowconfig.input parameters. Go do stuff, and each, go do stuff. However, we don't actually have a way to pass the S object, the record itself, into this. So we have two options there. Well, we really don't have any option because we need to set that parameter before we ship this stuff off. So again, going back to that contract concept, if I'm going to call a flow from Batchflow, I need it to accept some parameters that we agree on. Batchflow needs this, 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 and this. And if you're going to implement a flow that uses Batchflow, it needs to have those, make those input parameters available. So what are those parameters? Well, initially, and you can see it here, I'm, showing my, showing my magician showing off his secrets. Input record was in the original implementation of this, the thing that represented the record that was coming in. I also had input record ID here, which you would then just set it as the record ID. Because at first I was like, well, maybe you could use both, but I think this is dumb. I don't think this is necessary because if I'm just passing in the record, well, now I've got the record, I've got the ID for it. So I'm thinking not implementing that in the in the future. We talked a little bit about what if I do want to pass all of the records in to the flow. So I might need something like, I'm not going to implement this yet because this isn't in the wrong, or isn't in the right spot. But do I want input records that I can pass in? Maybe I do, maybe I don't. This also then raises the question of what are we actually going to pass in when we pass input record? Because right now, this is the query that we ran against the objects, right? Just the ID field, which means, pretty sure, I'll double check this, but I think I double checked this already. Whatever you're passing in to your flow, that's all you're going to get populated. So if we don't pick some more fields here, they won't be available to our flow, and we would in effect have to requery for those fields again. So it begs the question, what do we do here, right? Do we dynamically write the query so that it pulls all the fields that we have access to? Do we want to, it's a little bit like killing a fly with a shotgun, but I think it would guarantee that we have everything we need inside the flow. We could maybe configure the fields that are needed somehow on each of these, maybe on each of our flow ads, we have a list of fields that are needed. That sounds like work to me. And there'd be a lot of configuration. It would definitely limit the number of fields that we're dealing with, but is that the kind of configuration we want to have to deal with? The lazy side of me says no. So I think this has to evolve to get all of the fields that are that we have access to, because they may be executed against. The other thing this won't do is, again, as far as I recall, we're not going to have the relationship aspect of the records. So if I'm passing in a contact, I'm going to have account ID, but I'm not going to have account.name or account.this.that whatever that we can do inside of Flow. So I'll double check that, but I'm pretty sure that's there is a limiting factor there, and have to think about how to handle that. And in the past, I've handled it by, if I need more stuff about the record that's coming in, well, I'll requery for it. I'll take that hit at the start of each execution, but Is that, is that terrible? Maybe not. So something to, as we get closer to having a flow that's executing this stuff, we'll actually see how this interaction plays out, because I don't know the answer to all the things that I just laid out. Hopefully we can get those answers and, find out, all right, what can we do here? I'm going to leave it super simple for right now. So what do we have going on right now? We're checking to see if we have flows configured for our execution. If we do, then we're going to loop over our records. Even if we're passing a batch size of 1, we're still going to loop over it. If it's a batch size of 200, we're still going to loop over it. For now. Again, we'll see if we can tune that batch to pass more records in. What are the implications of doing that? Go through each of our flows. Sequence matters, right? Because if I want to queue up a bunch of different flows to run against these records over and over again, I want I want to make sure that it comes back with in the right order. Do X, then do Y, then do Z. That's a great kind of use case for this. We can set that up, schedule it, and then it'll just run, and we'll be able to observe what's happening. But sequence matters. So if we have them, loop over the records, loop over the flows. We don't need. We do need this, right? So we have our input parameters coming from our flow config. And that's cool because we can add more stuff, right? If we had, let's do, here's a new map. And we'll just say, I guess favorite color. And the answer is red. The answer is always red. So that will let me pass a input parameter, literal value red, into my red flow 2, and we'll execute against that. So I guess if we wanted to set the favorite color of every account to red, boom, we can have that. So that takes care of the parameters that we want to send in. Now we have to take care of the parameters that Batchflow needs to send in so that it can, affect any change on these records. So that's why we have this input parameters. That's why we're adding our own input record parameter. I'm also wondering if this needs to be input record. Maybe this can just be record, because when I first implemented this, I had input, like I said, I had input parameters and then I had output parameters, and I would kind of like it to just be, the same thing. What we pass in is what we get back. I think there might be some other conditions that say, "Ooh, don't do it that way," but let's see how we do. All right. So what we have right now would let us, run some records, pass it into a flow that we've configured, and run it, and then we'd be done. So we probably could save this, and we're not going to implement anything in Finish yet. We'll look at that in a little bit, but I think we're maybe bug free and able to save this. Let's see. And then maybe we can run it. Nope. Let's see. Method does not exist or incorrect signature. Flow add. Where am I calling that? Line 30. Oh, add flow, not add. Wait, no. Flow configs.add. Oh, not the name. Sorry, we need the flow config passed in there. So we'll do it like that instead. Very slow. There we go. Okay, so, let's run this. All right. First things first, let's put a bunch of data in here. Let's get, let's get 5,000 account records or something, something like that. I'm just going to run, let's run an Apex script over here. List account accounts equals new list count. For integer x equals 1, x less than or equal to 10,000, x plus plus. Accounts dot add new account. Name equals account plus x. And then we'll insert those. All right, I think 10,000 is my limit, right? That I can do DML against in a synchronous call. Where are you? Apex. Am I blind? Oh, can't spell. Execute and maximize data. Boop. Oops, what did I miss? Oh yeah. Let's insert the accounts, not just... What number am I thinking of? No, not like that. Do that. Cooking. Yeah, it's going to take a minute. Might time out. I don't know if it's going to let me get away with 10,000. Or more likely it's done running, but my VS Code is taking a hot second to get the results back. So now the big question is, did it... that's really weird. I don't get all. Oh dear, I call them all account equals 1. Whoops. Let's do this. Let's do equals select ID from account, order by ID. So first in should be first in wins, and then for we'll need let's see. I don't know why I feel compelled to have them have unique names, but so be it. For account A, go to accounts. Integer x equals 1. A dot name equals account plus x plus plus. And then we'll update our accounts. All right, ID, sure, that should work. I was afraid the duplicator was going to, the dedupe rules were going to kick in and mess that up. Oh, too many rows. Do I have 10,001? Let's just say limit 10,000. Maybe I had my limits off there. Yeah, I think I did. Oh, because it's 1. I think I did end up with 10,001. Cooking. Hopefully I did it right this time. Still going. Again, I think it's done, but no, I guess it hasn't committed yet. Sometimes I get this effect where, yeah, the whatever was running in VS Code is long since completed, but maybe it's the log file or what have you that it's trying to process back. Um, Maybe. There it goes. Yep. So see, this is done, and now it's done. Okay, so we got 10,000 records with different names. Guess I could have been more clever and add zeros in front of them, but that's fine. Okay, so we got a bunch of records that we can act against now in our in our batch flow. So in its simplest form, we could take this and go call it in the other over here. Just use this as our scratch pad. All right, so we're going to use those 10,000 accounts that we that we just created. We're not going to add any flows yet, not yet. I'm going to say bf.init should be enough to get us going. Is that how we set that up? Yep, we say init. It creates a batch based on this object and the batch size that we want, and then it returns us the ID. So calling this, well, we don't even need this. Let's double check our. See, we could do some more of these just to get them all nice and looking the same. There's Sokol where. Do batch size. Default that. Anything else to tidy up? I guess the action. Okay, I'll move these up. All right, there's all of our properties. There's our add flows. There's our init. Again, we don't have, I don't think we have a constructor. Do we need a constructor for this? I think the answer is no. I mean, maybe we want to do something at some point where we can just pass in the usual suspect properties, but for right now, this is fine. Okay, so while that's hopefully saving, we've got a batch flow ready to go here. And let's bring up the Apex jobs. So we can see these come in. What did I break? Execute batch from the type database. What? Wait, what? We can't pass in. I think I just got a syntax error here somewhere. So database dot execute batch. Where are you? Wait. Oh, wait. This is execute batch. Um, that should take... Batchflow is implementing batchable. Oh, do I have batch size as a string? Yeah, that's not going to work. There we go. There we go. Whoop. All right, we got that. So we should be able to call this. All right, so we fire this up. We should get, we didn't change the batch size, so this should run 200 at a time. Where's my execute apex? Oh, whoops. This is actually batchflow dot batchflow action. Because now we're outside of the... There we go. So let's go see what's going on here. Okay, pretty quick. We went through, we gave it 10,000 records essentially, because that's what that query was going to return. Maybe a little bit more, because I've got something going on there. And that was it, right? So not much happened there, but we initialized batch flow, which initialized a batch, and you know that happened. Kind of uneventful. Well, let's now add a flow into the mix here. Let's make a new flow. Auto launched. The other ones won't work. All right, and so that contract, right? We need to be able to accept parameters in and out. So, and in this case, we're going to need to understand what we're about to process, right? So unfortunately, we can't pass generic S objects back and forth. We have to type them, but we know we're going to call this from a batch flow that's configured to run against accounts. So that should be okay. So let's pass in record. This is again, I think this is the name we want to go with for this. And then here's record. We're not going to pass multiple. We're only going to pass one at a time. And I know that this is going to be an account. So let's pass an account. Input and output. Output's new for me. We're going to experiment with this a little bit. And then that's it. So what can we do from here is let's set name. I'm not really sure what that means. Sorry, bear with me a second. Yeah, I don't know what that is. Okay. Something going on on the stream here, just trying to figure it out. Okay. Anywho, all right. So let's do something. Let's do something to the names of each of these accounts. So accounts are going to come into this flow through the record variable, and we're just going to have one assignment called set name. And oh, I'm sorry, I got some feedback here. There we go. So what we're going to do, we're going to set the accounts name equal to, let's just say, this is an account. Okay. Let's save this as account set name. I'm just going to run this wide open. I probably wouldn't do this in normal world. We'll activate that. Okay, so when we run this next time against our 10,000 accounts, we should get this as an account for each of the names. Now, we're going to get that, but we're not actually going to do anything with it, right? Let's run it, and we'll see how it, one thing that we're going to see here is how does it compare time-wise. So right off the bat, this executed a batch and did absolutely nothing. So it started and ended at basically the same time. I'm curious, how does this perform when we are going to drop in and out of the flow for each of these. So let's see what happens if we run this. Actually, wait, we have to let's configure it first, right? Action object bf dot add flow. And the flow we're going to add is called account set name. We're not going to pass any parameters into it. There's nothing more to pass. I could pass the value that I want the name to actually be. So we could do that in a second. But for now, let's just run this and we'll see how it plays. All right, the batch is queued up. So, already it's taken a little bit longer. Not really a surprise. And negligible, right? I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, when I ran the first one, I ran it and then I came over here and it was done. The second one I ran it, I came over here and it was, working through it. So, we'll see as time goes on how much more of an impact does this have on the on execution. Not that we necessarily care because we're running in a batch context. So, we're doing this because speed isn't our biggest concern. But yeah, so that ran. Nothing happened, right? Because there's two things not happening here. First of all, nothing is happening in the flow to actually save the record, right? So there's no change. We've changed a field value, but we've done nothing else with it. So we need to get it back from the flow and then do something with that. So our record, if we're using record here, and this is an input-output parameter, so this is a little bit uncharted territory for me. I haven't done this yet, and so now we're going from stuff I know to stuff I definitely don't know. So we're going to run this, start it, let it execute, and then I think we can just say, hey, thanks for that. Now I'm going to set my record back to the variable that I want back, which is record. So I should have a record now that has been updated with the right value, still retaining the same settings here. I'll be curious what comes back with this. I should just have ID and name. I guess I could debug that, but oof, that's a whole lot of debugging. going on. Maybe we could limit this to just like, I mean, you get the point, right? We can run it over 10,000 records. I don't think we need to keep doing that. So maybe what we do instead is we'll do a debug and we'll reduce the size of this. But all right, so we ran through our flows, or we had flows to run through. We looped over each record. We're doing the stuff. We're getting our record back, which should now be changed, should now be updated. And then that's also part of our, should be part of our scope, because I think we're it's passing it by reference. So I should then be able to say, here's what do we want to evaluate? We want to determine what are we doing at the end of all this. So if, let's see, if this dot flow, what do we call it? If this dot action equals batch flow action, why they're not showing up? Batch flow action dot update. Then let's update those records that we just, really the scope, right? It's the records in scope right now. Otherwise, if it's explicitly update or explicitly delete, I don't want to assume one or the other, because that would be bad. Which means you could also have like a, I guess we could also have like a none action, right? It's literally just then we're just kind of wumping. Right? Does this look better? None action. I don't know. Now I'm just being picky. I suppose we could just default it to none action, and because we don't want to assume, we want the user to commit to one or the other. I think I'm going to do that. Not the user, we want the developer to commit to one or the other. Okay. So let's go back over here. We've added our flow. Let's reduce the size of this. BF dot. Well, actually, wait. We could just say we don't even want to limit the size. We want to say BF dot SocalWare. Now, I technically can use this for other stuff too, right? I could just say like limit 1,000. Right? It just drops the whole thing in there. So if we go look at when we're constructing this, oh, actually, no, I take it back. We can't do that because it's going to want to put a where clause in there. So let's do this, right? Where ID does not equal null, limit 1,000. A little Socal hacking there, right? Like kind of cheating it. Probably would want to be a little more stringent about what we're passing there. Not, I mean, we can't do a delete or stuff like that, but this is dynamic Socal, and I'm using the where clause field to yes do a where clause, but then also slam some stuff on the end of it. So, we got to think about that. Is 1,000? 1,000 is probably okay. I wanted to, and again, at the risk of this being kind of ugly, let's system.debug scope at the top, and then we'll debug scope at the bottom, see what they look like. We should have our list of updated accounts with all the same name. Then we should be able to save that, and our changes are boom done. So let's find out. That's everything. Okay, queued up. Oh, I definitely wanted to open the debug console for this one, or the dev console, sorry. So we should get, hopefully, logged to death here. Let's see how this is running, or if it's still prepping itself. Nope, that ran pretty quick. I did not get any logs. I think I missed the boat, or the bus, or whatever you want to say. Did our records update? I didn't get my debug, so I'm not really sure what we ended up with here. Let's do a filter. Oh, so that matters. Account name contains, I think I called him this is an account. Okay, so I did not have the effect I was expecting. So let's find out what happened here. Hopefully we can get some debug logs in here. If not, I'll just fire up the logs themselves, but if I can just get them to stream in here, that's cool. Okay. Okay, ran fast. There we go. Let's see what one of these looks like. So we only got the accounts IDs back. So that's kind of interesting because even though we passed in the property. Now here's a curiosity. What if we pass in the name field? Because this would also tell us that you can't change a record that you're interacting with or I should say you can't set a field value that isn't passed into you, which is curious. So let's see what can we get here. So now this is not what I would normally do, but I'm just kind of hard coding this to say like, all right, let's pass in the name as well as the ID. All right. And we'll do our thing again. Let's clear out our console here. Okay, fired it up again. Cooking. Done. Open one of these. Interesting. So let's see. We have, they are not coming back with their names changed. If we go over here, our record is input and output. We are setting the name. I don't know if it has anything to do with what we're with the name that we're using for this, but it doesn't seem to be coming back. So here's what I was doing before. Let's see if this changes anything. Output record. Now the other thing here too, this could be something else. This could be, if this is, well, maybe this is in a read-only, if only read-only context because we're just pulling it from scope. Like what would happen if we had a, what if we did this list as object updates? What if we filled this with those records coming back? And then saved that instead. Let's try that. Let's see if that changes anything. Let's debug updates too. This will tell us if it's, are we losing something in the sauce, or do we need to pass back a different a different parameter here. Hoping to keep it like concise, you know, so we don't need too many moving parts, but maybe I went down this path already and discovered, you know, this is what we were, this is why we had to have these other parameters around. Did I close my debug? Nope. Okay, still there, good. Update failed. What did we get? Interesting. And very interesting. Okay, so what we got back, we passed in the IDs and the names. We got back just the name. That is curious. I would have expected it to have just come, you know, just come back as it went out. So let's see. Here's our scope. This is what we're passing in, and we can see that. ID name, ID name, ID name. And then we pass that in. We run against it. This is what we get back. And the ID doesn't come along with it. That's really interesting. I just would have assumed what you shuttled in is what would come back. And we're just setting the account name here. So, yeah. Weird, right? Now, what if we, so this was kind of the hit that I would, you know, sort of come to accept. If we get, right, if we get we get the account. So this can be the advantage of just passing in the ID, right? Because if we, what is that? Welcome to Cleaning Glasses with Tom. I have no idea what that was. Oh, it's a giant hair, eyebrow, eyelash, whatever you call it. If we were to just pass in the ID of the record, because it seems like we have to go get it anyway, right? So that's kind of interesting. Oof, what have I done here? I swear we're going to have a show in a second, but this is real bad. Real bad. Oh my goodness. We might have to take a break so I can clean. That's a little better. Okay. Whew. All right, so instead of, we're going to still pass in our record, but now let's just get the account in question. And we'll say we want the ID equals, this is our input record. Okay, so now we're going to get that record. We're going to get the account. We're going to set the name from get account equals that. And then what if we do one more assignment, which is set output record. And then our output record equals our get record. So there's some changes, right? So what we're saying now is potentially, if you want to do Batchflow, you have to, maybe we're just going to pass the record ID in here because you're going to need that. So you're going to have to query for it. because we can't pass it to you. We'll do whatever we need to do here. And then we need to set the output record to whatever the thing that we requested is. So let's see how that treats us. Okay, let's run this. Queued up. Oh. Found null S object at position 0. Interesting. Are we done? We were done. Null, 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 null. Huh. All right, so we get the account. We set the name. Output record is available for output. This is weird. I don't remember having so obviously we're looking at this again because I've built this before as mass batch. I don't remember having these troubles, and but I was also no, because we were passing in input record, we were getting back output record. None of this was unusual, even if I had to query for that record coming in, it's saying we're getting a null back, which is really am I doing something? Let's see, did I miss something over here? Updates.add. Oh, wait. All right, so now this is output record. Wait. Let's try that again. Maybe that was just the issue. Hopefully. Well, we're still not getting the ID. Does that make sense? So, okay. It does make sense that but we're just telling it. That's very strange. That seems weird. Get the account. We set the name from get account. We set the output record equal to get account. Like, why wouldn't it carry the ID over? Right? I mean, that seems strange. I know how to fix this, but it just seems contradictory. But maybe it's not. Maybe it's truly just returning the values that we've adjusted. What if we did something like this? What if we said output record .id equals get record .id? This could just be very literal in how it... I hope I didn't miss anything and not activate it. I guess that's the other thing that could very well be possible. I feel like I shouldn't have to do this, but let's see what we get back. Okay. Now the ID comes back null? What? Record dot account ID. What is going on here, friends? Let's debug this with one of our... Yeah, sure, save it. Oh my goodness. Yep, good. Save, new version. Count 197, let's do that one. Look at that. Strange, right? Seems very strange. Wow, it's like right there, you know. And I shouldn't, again, I shouldn't have to do that, right? Because it knows here's the ID, and yet even if I set it, it doesn't work. It works here. It works in the context of the flow, but then it doesn't work when it comes back as a parameter. So something is fishy. Oh, let's take a seat. Let's see. Looking at the old implementation, this is mass batch, basically doing the same stuff, cleaned up a little bit of the looping logic, but you know, we would pass these. We'd get this back if there was one. And then we'd basically just set record, right, to that value. I didn't want to do anything with record after that because I wanted to keep being available for the next result. So what we did here though is if output record is not null, then we add it to the final output. And if we weren't running any flows, we would just add them all to the output, because I might have been running into an issue with trying to update the scope versus update a different list. But I feel like we're kind of doing that here. Right, that's basically that's our output record, same idea. So what is different? Really weird. Even setting the ID, it still comes back null. I don't remember seeing this. And in our test, if I picked a record, shouldn't have to set that. Shouldn't have to do this. We could flip it around, right? We could cut this, put it here, right? Set our output record to that, then set the name of output record. What does that do? Okay. Still the same. That's crazy. Nope, not that one. Makes no sense. I don't remember having this issue, and I've used that mass batch stuff quite a bit, like in other worlds, and I didn't have this problem. The old implementation here. Get the output record. Very, very odd. And we're even querying the record. You know, the hope was to not have to do this, right? Store all fields. Choose fields and let Salesforce do the rest. What if we, I don't know. I don't really want to do that. Maybe it's because we're automatically storing. I don't know. But even still, it should bring back the ID. And because it's not even doing that. And I'm setting it. I was trying to set it. You know, definitely shouldn't have to do this, right? So output record dot ID equals. This is insane. We absolutely should not have to do this, but why not? Why not? Yep, same error still. That's crazy. What on earth is going on? Output record is an account, right? Available for output. Yep. Record is an account. Get account. We're querying an account. I don't know. I didn't have these problems before. Yeah, this like just worked. Here's the old stuff. I don't know what to do different here, really. What if, all right, this is crazy. What if record isn't available for output? Does anything change then? I can't imagine it does, but you know, we're guessing. We're guessing. Yeah, run that script again. Nope. Nope. I feel like I'm just missing something really obvious here. But let me go see if I can find an org that has the mass batch stuff running in it and see what those flows look like. I feel like let's see. Well, this is the mass batch project. Do I have any flows in here? No, I just did them I used it for testing, for demo purposes. And I didn't keep any of the flows in here, though. This is really something. And all kinds of wrong somethings. Maybe it's record? No, because this worked, right? If I debug it, fine, save. I don't know why you have to do that. If I debug it and I pick a record, crazy, 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 crazy. Guess I have to take a break because take a break and go bang my head against the wall because this is weird. Doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense because this is working. There's nothing unique over here. We could debug output record. Like let's do that, right? Oops. I cannot type today. All right, it's going to be a pretty massive... Okay, so now we're going to get a whole lot of debug on these output records. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. What? No, the IDs are still null. But why is it not blowing up? Should have failed, right? What? Wait, I'm so confused now. We passed you a bunch of records. Am I not adding them? I'm not adding them to the update. That's why. That's why it succeeded. But this still doesn't make any sense. I can't even set even if I wanted to. Right? Literally setting the account ID here. Like, what's going on? We could, can I see the flow execution in here? Am I not passing? Oh my goodness. It's time for a break because I'm a dummy. Oh, remember that whole part I said where, yeah, we're going to create our own input parameters, but we also have to add the stuff that Batchflow wants? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. It's because we have this, but this is using this. So I think what we need to do is say input parameters dot add put all flow config dot input parameters. And now we actually have all the parameters we need. And I'm going to do this and it's going to work and I'm going to be sad and I'm going to go eat a donut. And then I'm going to come back and then pick up where I left off, happier having eaten the donut. Bleh! All right. Let's just make sure this actually works. I feel compelled to like rewind all of this now because this is probably all bunk right now. But let's just see if it works now. We don't get any errors. And then we'll clean up our flow because it's definitely, there's way more there than we actually need. We shouldn't have to do all that nonsense because it really is nonsense. Okay, look at one of these, debug you. Hey, would you look at that? Did I debug the whole thing? All right, we're not adding it. Right, we're not adding it. But this is enough to see. Yep, yep. It's time for a break, kids. We definitely need to not do some work for a minute, go eat something, and come back and finish this up and make sure that everything that I told you was working is actually working, because it's actually going to work now that we did the most important step here. Okay. Pausing screen, showing be right back message, and what else? And turning off audio. Be back in a couple minutes while I go eat that donut. Oh, let's get the last hour of this show to go better than the hour before this. All right. It's working. It works when you make it tell it to do the things you want it to do. Oh boy. All right. Well, let's rewind here a little bit now that this incredibly critical step in the process of adding our flows configuration parameters to all the configuration parameters, which includes the record that we're sending. Now we can go all the way back and say, hey, can I pass this as an input and an output? Hopefully the answer is yes. Do I really need to get the account? Let's find out. Oh, we can't do that because we got to change some other stuff here. Can we delete this? Yes. Can we delete this? Yes. Set name. We're literally just going to say, hey, record.name equals this. And then I would argue that I don't actually need output anymore either. So let's activate that and now go back to our flow. So input's coming in, output's coming back. Still just have, I want to go all the way back here. I want to take that out too. I want to just pass the ID in. I want to just open up this snack bar thing. Try not to chomp on it too loud while I eat it. Okay. Let's see how we do. Uh-oh. I think I lost my, darn it, lost my debug window. That's okay. Let's see if we have anything in here. Oh, wait. Yeah, I didn't save them. And I didn't have a debug, so I can't see what actually happened. Do over. Look at that. Cool. Cool. Now, we can do this, I think. Set the record back to itself. We'll check the scope down here. Again, not sure if we should just update the scope or update the store a different set. In the original implementation, I had stuff going into a different output records list. I don't know if we need that. So let's try this again. Uh-oh. Excuse me. Okay, we saved that. Now, this should actually save records. We should get our whatever 1,000 1,000 accounts with the same record name. Excuse me. Okay, and go. But did we? Okay, so that's curious. What came in, what went in, came back out. So we didn't actually get the update back. Well, let's see. I sent in record, sent back record, but I think we still need, let's see, this object, excuse me, output record. And let's debug that. I think the vibe that I'm getting here is don't mess with the scope as best as I can see. Now let's see what we end up with. Well, let's do one more thing. Let's debug that there, and then let's add it to updates. Okay. And now we'll try it again. Right, so 71. We have, what was 71? Well, 71 was our updates. 72 was our scope. So it looks like we can't set the record to what comes back. Looks like it just doesn't, it doesn't like that. We could try one more thing. Let's see. If we said record equals output record, then let's debug both of them, see what that looks like. Okay. Yeah, but it seems like the scope just doesn't change, right? Now, here's something to consider. We're going to pass that record in. Right now, we're going to pass that record into each flow that we step into. but we won't have. So what was happening in the last implementation of this was we'd go through the flows here. We'd get the output record back. And then we would say if the output record isn't null, then we set it. And then out here, see, I think this, maybe this is something that's missing. It feels like we need to take the scope here. Well, actually, no, because we run each record through all of the flows. But the question then becomes, what do I get back, right, from each of these? If I have 5 flows that I'm passing a record through, how do I make sure that all of them have, manipulated the record data appropriately and they flow through accordingly? And this is in the old version, we passed in the record, got the record back. If it's not null, set the record. Again, we're making that update. Because this is scope, right? The bottom, line 74 is debugging scope. But here we're literally setting it, and it doesn't seem to recognize it. It only recognizes it when we take it out of scope, which is unusual. I would have expected, I'm trying to think, I'm sure I've written just plain old batch jobs before that would let you update, the scope or the record value and then update the scope. But that's not happening here. Even though if we put those into the updates, put output records into updates. So here would be the next thing to do. What if we put record into updates? Will it show us that we actually have the value? And is it something about the debugging of scope that we are losing? Let's see. All right, so let's see here. We added, so in 73, now we've been adding our records to that, and scope still remains the same. So that's okay, right? We should just have a it seems like we'd be helped out if we had, if we said records here, right? And then as we go through this, we actually probably want to add, maybe that makes sense to just say records, add all, and add the scope in there. And then run it against records, maybe. And then record equals output record. Then we don't actually have to do the update, so we just kind of preload it. Let's see how this works. And then let's see what records looks like versus scope. Do. I'm not sure if there's something, mystical and magical about scope that we just can't mess with it. Whoops. What on earth did I just click? Okay. I clicked the breakpoint results. All right, let's see what this looks like. Hmm. Okay, so interesting. It's almost like we don't want to add them until they've changed. Let's see, we're looping through records here. Man, this feels weird. Something it I mean, I know I can just populate another. I can add them to another array. I mean, I could actually just use this records thing, right? And then as changes come back, then add them there. But then I guess making sure that it's not already in the array. Hmm. Hmm. List object records read all. Well, it's interesting that we can see. I think both of these are going to show us that the values are in fact there. Okay. So, here's the records. And yet, not here. So, I want to make sure that as we run each of these flows, it has collectively all the stuff that it needs about it. And I'm not confident that that's going to happen once we add our second flow in here. I guess we need to find out by adding in our second flow. Because this first one should run, set some values. The second one should run, do something else. And I don't want what we did in the first round to get lost in the second round. So that's why the hope is we can just update the record here. But maybe that's not the case. And maybe that's what was happening over. Where's my other one? Output records, right? And then output record equaled this. If output record does not equal null, record equals output record. So we're doing that here too. if we're in the context of running flows. If we weren't, then we just did that outside of here. So what if we did something really goofy here? I don't know. Let's see. This is somehow casting it, make it, make it better. Some weird little nuances here that I guess I just never, maybe I don't know if I never observed these or never just took it for granted. Nope, still the same. Still the same coming back out. Here's a thought. What if this was a map, right? Or what if I cloned? I wonder. What if I cloned each of the... Not that we're going to clone the, like, save it, but we're just going to kind of clone it in memory. What on earth am I doing here? Nope. I don't know. Let's try that. Subject clone. So if we did let's see, preserve ID true, is deep clone true? Let's see, s dot clone, no. Okay. We want to preserve the ID and do a full copy. I just want to, like, somehow, like, I feel like the scope is refusing to let go of this thing. So let's see what happens here. We're building Batchflow with a side order of me learning how to, do things. Oh. Hey, Igor. Just saw you in the chat. When are you going to get on the show? I need another special guest. I need you to join me. I need you to come with something awesome and weird to show off. You have to top Tony. You have to top Tony's show last week. And goodness knows you're going to top whatever I'm trying to do here today. Oh, I thought this was all working great, but you know, we're going to get there. It's going to be awesome. I swear. All right. Let's see what's going on this time. There's all our stuff. Still, this is crazy. What in the world? Hard to top a Batchflow. I don't know, man. It'll be better when it's actually working. Oh, let's see. Let's see. I guess all right. Maybe to summon Occam's razor here a little bit. Maybe I'm chasing a problem that isn't really a problem. So we'll go. We're gonna leave our set name kind of useless flow here, and let's make another one that goes against the account. Auto launched, and we'll call this one. So we need our record coming in. It's still going to run against the account object, in and out. I still need to check that. Well, that's the thing. When it comes back in debug, it's good, right? I think if I look up here, yeah, I got 66 is just the output record, and then I set the output record to the record, and I'm happy. And I assumed this would be referencing whatever's up here in records that I've tried to clone it, I've tried to just pass it, I've tried to do all the crazy things. It just does not care. When we get down here, line 74, no names for you. Nuts. Nuts, nuts, nuts. And either I feel like I'm missing something obvious here, but it just seems nuts. Because I can go make all these changes, and it's not going to matter if we don't crack this out into its own thing. What if maybe it's the first time? What if the first time we no, because I need this to process like over and over again. All right, well let's just try throwing a second flow in here. So what's set? I don't know, set website. Just set those all the same. Record website equals www.youcan'tdothatonsalesforce.com. All right, this is account set website. All right, so now we've got two, and again, I'm going to run this wide open. We've got two flows that are making changes to the account. So I should be able to come up here, add a second flow, set website, and then we should get, all these records that are going in are going to get their name set, then all these records are going to get their website set. Well, actually it's going to be, let me double check that. Record, flow, record, flow, record, flow. So at the end of this, we should have all those values. So as we watch output record and record come together, and maybe that's what we need. We just need a different variable name or something. But anyway, we should get multiple values being updated here. So let's see how we do. A lot more data. Okay, so let's see what we've got going on here. So 66 and 68. Ah, okay. So we're going in, we're setting the name, we're going back, we're setting the website, boop a boop a boop, over and over and over again. And yet, when we get to the bottom, there's still. I want to try one more thing. So once this is done, right? I don't have like conflicting properties or anything, do we? No. What's this finally look like when we get down to the end here? Just gonna loop through everything one more time after we've processed it, which seems crazy, but I just don't know why we're losing our values here. Go through all those. Yeah, see, this is the part I'm definitely missing here. We do all this work. We see our values building in each case. Almost wonder if this would be kind of crazy. Let's try something else. So for record and scope, we'll go back to our scope thing. Records equals new list as object. Okay. Now, we gather the output records here. Oops. So records.add output record. We still want to set record equals output record. So we preserve our values, even though we're somehow losing scope with our variables here. We just keep doing that. Even we're gonna lose them, right? We're gonna reset this. Actually, wait. We want to do that. Where do we want to do that? We want to do that. Let's do that because this is on a per record basis. So what if we just say here records dot add record. Okay. What if we also do s object right? Then we say this equals this. Because we've looped through that. After we finish all the flows for this particular record, then we add output record here. Still seems crazy, but let's try to cajole this variable situation. And go. We know that, at least we know that we're stepping in and out of each of our flows. So that's cool. And we're preserving the values. We just don't seem to be keeping them at the end. Right? So we watch each of our records here, get this, this is an account, and then get website. So then we get to 75, which is our records that we're adding our outputs. Okay, so here's... This has the last good change to each of these. But what's curious is it doesn't have the website. Which doesn't really make any sense. Because we can see this ID, this record with this ID steps in to the first flow, comes back with a new name. Then we go to the next flow, passes it in with that name, and then it gets a website back. And then I add it to records. So it's weird that we get the version that just has this is an account in it. That seems really weird. Let's see. Let's step it back a little bit. So I guess we don't really even need to test for this, right? Like if we don't have any flows to process, then there's nothing, we don't really care about it. Yeah, we could take this out. All right, so for each record in the scope, for each flow in our configs, send in the record, run the flow. Pull back the record as output. I wonder if it has anything to do with input and output. But it seems like it wouldn't, because it's passing it through in both cases. We're not adding the records. And also scope doesn't even have the changes, right? Yeah, scope doesn't recognize any of this happening to the records that are being passed around. It's like they're just there by value. They're not coming back by reference. How do we preserve this when we get to here? Well, let's see. Hold on. We're adding output records here as well. So maybe this actually goes way over here and eventually has, yeah. Yeah, so wait. Maybe it has them further down? Guess that could be. All right, let's not call that there. We're going to add these to output record when we're done with that record. And then hopefully our records will have everything they need. Can't mess with scope. That seems to be the... Which again, I thought I could just loop over scope, change values and inside a batch and I'd be fine. But maybe something's lost in this when it's passed over to the flow. All right, let's try this. Come on, open the batch. Not the batch, the log. Okay, so debug. Yep, 67, 67. It's building. The records are building. Get to the end. The records have been built. It's in our records call. We're happy. It looks like, yes, we have everything we want. Okay, so to heck with scope. Populate your own output here. I think this is necessary because it needs to pass it into the next iteration, but we can't rely on that value for some reason. So we'll keep building output record, and then we'll drop that into records, and then we can update records. And I don't think we want to, I don't think we're going to delete records. I think we're going to delete scope. So finally, maybe we can get this working. I mean, it's working. Let's get it saved. I guess that's the better. A lot of debugging. Very, very big log files. Okay, so it should look the same, and we should have saved some records. Let's see what we had going on in this at the bottom. Now there's some duplicate happening. Let's see, where was our update? Okay. Not see it in the logs. Can I see it in the records? Oh, look at that. Amazing. All right. So, yeah, we got it. Working the way it was supposed to. That must have been, you know, I should have gave a little more attention to the old code there. Where are you? Mass batch here. Because this is doing the important thing here. Whether to carry on with the record or to carry on with the output record or just the record. But I think we've done the same thing only different in this version. And it looks like we can use our input and our output as the same variable. So that makes life a little easier as you're building one of these. So if I'm going to build a Batchflow enabled flow, I need one variable. I need record passed in as an input and an output. And then I run my stuff through it, and then boop, back out it goes. It's important to, there's something about this, I hate to say scoping because the word scope is used here for the records that are coming in, but the scope of this record variable is such that despite all of this, despite capturing the output, despite setting the output record to the record, i.e. trying to pass the changes back onto the the record, which it works throughout the context of this loop. But as soon as you step outside of that, scope goes right back. So the scope, all the records in scope just have their IDs. So kind of bleeding off these output records and putting them in their own structure or their own list seems like what we got to do. So yeah, that's about all I can see about that. But working, yay. And so now we could do, what are some other interesting things that we could do here? Well, obviously I could run whatever logic I want against these records as they come through. I feel compelled to pass, to try and do one of these where we pass a list of records in. So let's create a new flow. Got a couple of minutes. Let's see what we can do with this. Leave it on a cliffhanger. So this we're going to call records, plural. And this will be a list. We'll still work with accounts, coming in, going out. Let's call this account set description, and this will be list in list mode. Yep. Okay. So since we're getting records in, now our loop is happening inside the flow. So let's loop records. Okay. And then we'll set each of these. Set in the description, right? Yep. Current description equals this is description. Pretty straightforward. Hopefully that's all we need to do. Now if we flip back over here, we're not currently set up here to handle that, right? So we could flip these around, I think. I don't see why not. We would just ask instead of asking each record to process all flows, we're going to ask each flow to process all records, right? That should work. What could possibly go wrong? I suppose we want to test this and make sure that it actually, it actually works. And if there's no flows to process, there's nothing to do here, right? So it also kind of shields any changes in that regard. We don't need to test if there are flows. There either are or there aren't. Excuse me, and they will run or they won't. Oh, why am I so tired? Let's rerun what we just ran and make sure. Well, I guess I should probably rerun this from account where name like this. Yeah. Account X. Should be about 1,000 of them that look like that. And they do, and we should have nothing in this list now. And we don't. Okay. So let's rerun this now. We were doing all flows each record. Now we're going to do all records each flow. See if we get the same effect. Guess I should clear this too before we run it. All right. Uh-oh, duplicate list, duplicate ID. Oh, wait. That's the problem. Yeah, because we're trying to add right. We're trying to add the so That's not gonna like that. And that's interesting too. If you see this is an account and then it tries to move to the next, but it's not finding it. Okay, well that makes sense that we can't do that. We can't do it that way. I'm sure there's another way to, to handle it. Yeah. It goes through the first flow, then it goes through the second flow, but then they're sort of, ignorant of one another. And then this is where the error. I'm surprised it even made it this far to put two. Are they the same? Yeah. That's the problem. We're adding them scoped, with two different variables. So, okay. Well, that isn't as simple as hoped. This still works. This works, but it doesn't support passing a what am I trying to say? Passing a list in, and if we flip it around, then we get duplicates in the list, which could. The challenge is the scoping of the record variable. It seems like, because we lose that if we don't do this specifically. So if we were to have, let's say, let's add in our flow config, we could have a public, I don't know what to call it right now, but just public string mode, right? another enum probably coming. So if I went through, this is the next challenge. If I went through each of the flows and said, are you running as a list or as an individual? That's kind of the mode that we were trying to get to. I can't really do that once I'm already in the scope of the records here. So somewhere up here I would need to say check for run as list thing, whatever that mode, or mode equals list, through each flow. So what's your mode? I'm run me as list, run me as individual. And maybe there's something, maybe we do have two kind of forks in the road for that, but again, preserving the scope of those variables is proving tricky. So I'll have to monkey around with that a little bit more. Maybe there's another way to approach it, but it's 2:00. We kind of got this working. We'll do some more batch flow next week. I might monkey around with this in between now and then. I will try to get a GitHub repo up and out for this, but I'd like to get this stabilized a little bit more. And hopefully amongst the rambling, you can kind of see like, oh, once batch flow gets out to your Salesforce org, you can call it however you want. Right now, we're just calling it from a couple of lines at Apex here. I think there's a future where you could make this configurable, Maybe there's a custom metadata type that could drive more of this. Maybe we create records that are sort of like a queue for executing these, and they store all these variables. There's some other things I'd like to explore further with this, but try to get this little fun hiccup thing we're dealing with here stabilized, and come back next week. We'll do some more. Unless somebody signs up for to join the show, in which case I'll watch them do smarter things than I can do. Till then, I'm Tom. You can't do that on Salesforce.